Alright, so as I mentioned, we're not working on bigmovieboys.com today. We're working on something else. So, about 2 years ago, I launched kindafunnyinreview.com as a hub for Kind of Funny's In Review podcast. And if you're not familiar with Kind of Funny, they are a group based in San Francisco. This is their main YouTube channel. They produce a bunch of podcasts, they produce a bunch of live streams, and they focus a lot on video game content. They have a daily video game show, and that's not really what I watch primarily. I'm not huge into video games myself, but they also cover a lot of movies and TVs and general entertainment and pop culture stuff. And that's the stuff that I certainly follow the most closely. And their biggest movie podcast is called In Review. And this started back in 2018 in preparation for Infinity War coming out. They did MCU In Review, where every week leading up to Infinity War, they watched sequentially one of the MCU movies. And as they went through, they would recap the movie, review the movie, and then rank the movie. That was kind of the big culmination of it all. And so they were trying to come up with a definitive list between them of how the MCU movies rank. So this went all the way, all the MCU movies leading into Infinity War. And then after that, they continued with different franchises. They did X-Men, they did Spider-Man, they've done Christopher Nolan, they've done some shorter 2 or 1 episode series like Gladiator pretty recently. They did Barbie In Review, even though there's really nothing to rank it against. But this has been a long-lasting staple in their podcast lineup. This one came out January 5th, 2018, and they're still doing it today. They've got a lot of plans for 2025. And one of the big changes they made this year is how the ranking system works. So up until now, they would try to maintain a list between whoever is hosting the episode. It's usually these guys, but they also have different members of Kind of Funny come in for different franchises. They have a lot of guests come in for different franchises. And they have a voting system, and it's kind of majority rules as far as how high on the list it can go. And when it's set in stone. And then as they move on, they have to work with what they got for future rankings. And obviously, there's never going to be an exact consensus. Everyone's going to have different opinions. Some people are going to like some movies more than others. And that's going to happen no matter what. But it has caused some headaches, it sounds like, for them trying to rank it, because on their personal list, they might have something relatively high, but on the definitive official list, it's pretty low. So when it comes to ranking a new film on the list, it's like, well, it's better than that one, but it's not as good as that one. It created some stress, it sounded like. So moving forward with all new franchises that they're doing, starting with Alien vs. Predator, which they just started a couple weeks ago, they're no longer doing their voting system to maintain one list. They're all creating their own individual lists and then mathematically determining what the official list would look like, combining all of their lists together. And this, again, started with their newest franchise that they're covering, Alien vs. Predator, but they also wanted to go back and re-rank their first ever series, MCU In Review. And so that's what they did this past week. These four, Tim, Andy, Greg, Nick, created their own personal lists of how they would rank every Marvel movie. Now this is also expanded outside of the MCU. This includes all of the other Marvel franchises that they have watched so far. So that's the X-Men movies, that's the Sony Spider-Man movies and Spider-Verse movies. That's Elektra and Daredevil, the movies that were kind of incorporated into Deadpool and Wolverine. It's now pretty beefy, this list. So I believe there are 62 total movies that they had to put into a list. They each have their individual ones, and those are mathematically combined in Tim's spreadsheet to determine what the official Kind of Funny ranking looks like. And so that changes how things are going to work on the site that I made, which is kindoffunnyinreview.com. So first and foremost, this is just kind of a one-stop shop place where you can find all of their episodes, which admittedly is a little bit harder than you might think. They've got a couple different YouTube channels. Some of the playlists aren't entirely up to date. So this is a hub where you can find every episode of In Review. And it's a pretty simple site overall. This is the homepage where you have the most recent episode at the top center here, the most recent franchise that this episode is from, which is MCU, and then the next most recent episode and franchise. Their episode before that was Aliens, because they have started the Alien vs. Predator universe. And so, an additional note here on the footer. This is a site that I made. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I believe they've seen it and think it's cool, but it's as far as it's really gone. So I don't own any of the content here. All I did was organize it and display it. You click on franchises on the top here. You can see all the different franchises they've done, ordered sequentially by when they've been most recently updated by default here, and they've done a bunch. They have certainly covered a lot. If there's a franchise that's your favorite, there's a pretty good chance they've done it already. And obviously they vary in how many episodes, MCU being the one with the most episodes is 73 there, but you can see there's a lot of Spider-Man episodes, good amount of Batman ones, only 2 Gladiators, only 2 The Shinings, as you'd expect. Then if you click into one of the franchises, this is where you start to see the rankings. So this is outdated right now because I haven't updated it yet. That's what we're doing today. But this was their official ranking of the MCU a week ago. And so you can see all of them listed here. I got a couple missing posters that'll be on the to-do list today. But then you also have this average ranking here, because the other thing you can do on the site is add your own rankings. So you can maintain your own lists if that's something that you do anyway. That's something that I did previously on Letterboxd or in my notes app. I've got a couple different franchise or director rankings. And so what this does is it compiles all of the user submitted rankings to determine an average based on the community. So there's a decent amount of people who have created an account and added their rankings. Certainly not enough to be definitive to say that this is how the entire community feels, but enough people have done it that you can actually kind of see some trends. Below this we can see all of the episodes for MCU in particular. If we click on one of these, let's just go to Deadpool and Wolverine. We can see what this page looks like. We've got the embedded video here, so you can actually watch it. This is just an embedded YouTube link. We've got a link back to the franchise that this is from. We can see who's in the episode. Again, this one is just some of the Kind of Funny guys, but they do have a lot of other guests and people who don't show up in every franchise, but will pop in from time to time. And then we've got some movie data here as well, with some of the cast and crew, a basic description. Nothing too crazy there, but then when we scroll down, this is where you can actually start inputting your rankings. So I'm signed in now, so this is my ranking as it stands currently on the site. We have, again, the outdated now, but official Kind of Funny ranking here. And then the average ranking, that's what we saw on the franchise page, was these two. Then you can also, if you know someone else who's using the site, you can find their rankings and see how you compare to one of your friends. So if I just find someone here, another GOAT in the Kind of Funny community, who I know is on the site, Cameron Kennedy. I don't know how much he's maintained his list here, but I know at first he submitted some of his rankings here. So I'm able to see how my list compares to the official list, how it compares to the average list, and then if there's someone in particular I want to find, I can see how my list compares to theirs as well. So that's the basic premise of how the site works. You can see and find all of their episodes, and you can also maintain your own lists. If you want to, you can also go to My Rankings here in this user menu and select your franchise. Again, you can see all the different franchises they've done. So if I just go to Spider-Man, we can see my Spider-Man rankings and how they compare. It's the same thing you would see on the episode page. So how does this change the website? Generally speaking, everything should look pretty much the same. But I need to change how I'm managing the official rankings and how those are being calculated. So I have like this whole admin dashboard that I use to actually keep up with all the new episodes. They put out an episode a week, and there's no way to, or at least I don't have a way to automate this process. So I just go in and I add every new episode, and based on what they're reviewing it, I'll get the movie data for that episode. And if they start a new franchise, I'll add a new franchise for that episode. But this is how I was managing the Kinda Funny rankings. This interface is all just drag and drop, and then you can save it. So this was just a single screen that I made for myself to be able to re-rank and organize the official ranking lists as they put new episodes out. What I'm going to have to do now is this page is going to have to change so that I can maintain the lists of whoever's in the episode, their individual rankings, and then do some sort of calculation to figure out what the official ranking list looks like. I think I'll keep this old one as like an archive, and maybe you can toggle it and see the old version. All of the old franchises, as far as I understand, are going to keep their rankings. They're not going to go back and re-rank every franchise. I think this new system, at least for now, only pertains to MCU and then any new franchise they're doing moving forward. I don't know if they're gonna go back and re-rank like Fast and Furious when the next Fast and Furious movie comes out. So I need to be able to accommodate either scenario there. So that's pretty much the game plan today. I think this is the page that's going to change the most, and then a lot of stuff behind the scenes. The UI itself shouldn't have to change all that much. I have not worked on this site in a meaningful capacity in almost 2 years, so I don't know what this code base is even going to look like, how ugly it's going to be, how much I've improved as a developer, how many things I've changed in my tech stack or just in the way I manage projects that will cause some frustrations as I'm going through this, but that is pretty much the game plan. So I think we're just going to go over to the laptop and start coding.
The next day.
So yesterday, I went over what Kinda Funny is, I went over what In Review is, and I spent 4 hours or so on stream coding away, trying to update the In Review website. I finished it off stream. I didn't get everything that I wanted to do done, but I got the most important parts of it done. And so I want to go over those changes right now. So if you look at the homepage, you're probably thinking, this looks pretty much exactly the same, and you'd be correct. Slight difference is that in the top right, there's now this Big Movie Boys logo. I did add a link to bigmovieboys.com. But outside of that, you're not really going to see any changes on the homepage. Where you will see changes is in any of the franchises that they start doing moving forward. So right now, MCU and Alien vs. Predator were the two franchises that are using their new ranking methodology. And so if we click into Deadpool and Wolverine here, we're going to see some changes here. First thing you'll notice in the top right here, we can now see the individual ranks for Tim, Greg, Nick, and Andy. And that's because I'm now able to maintain and keep up to date their individual rankings. And we'll see when I scroll down that I'm using those to calculate the official Kinda Funny ranking as well. So for any of these MCU movies, we can see how they each individually rank them on the right here. And then when we scroll down, this mostly looks the same, the only difference being that this is now a drop-down option, and this Kinda Funny official ranking matches their newly revised list, because I'm using the same method that they use to calculate this average ranking between the 4 of them. Including ties, by the way. You'll see there's 2 5s here. That's how the math works out. I saw some people in their subreddit saying they shouldn't have ties. It's just math. They are equally rated in this new system. So there are ties, but in the event that movies come out that rank higher than these tied movies for some of them, it'll shake things up. I imagine these ties will not last forever if we get movies that are, on the caliber of some of the ones in the top 10 here. But these lower ties, like I think there's some ties near the bottom. Yeah, with like Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and New Mutants. As things get moved around a little bit more, these ties will break themselves, So here we have the drop down. By default, it'll be their Kinda Funny official ranking, but we can see each of their individual lists as well. So if we go to Tim's, this is now Tim's list for the MCU. And since we're on Deadpool and Wolverine, it'll still highlight that, but you can see his top 10 or so. We can jump down to Andy, and it updates with his list for the MCU. And the other franchise that the new system is working for is Alien vs. Predator. This one will be less apparent because there are only 2 movies in. We can see the official ranking, and we can see 3 out of 4 of them said Aliens ranked over Alien, except for Greg. So we can pull up Greg's list here, and we can see how he ranks these movies. And obviously, as more and more episodes come out for this franchise, I will continue to update their individual lists, and that will calculate the official list. Again, to the end user, they're not going to see much of a difference. A lot of the work that I did was in this admin page that only I have access to, but this is now how I have this set up. I actually made some more slight adjustments to this. I just haven't deployed them yet. But now the idea being that I can see the official ranking here. I can't modify the official ranking technically. I mean, technically I can, but it's not actually going to save anything. What really happens now on the back end is I just individually update their lists, and then this official list will be calculated based on those 4. And I had to do that through the individual franchises here. I added this new flag, whether or not we want to show individual rankings. So all of the other franchises they've done aren't affected, aren't using this new system, at least not yet. So it's still showing the original list that they came up with for the MCU, Alien vs. Predator, and then anything they do moving forward, I'll just check this box to say they're doing individual rankings. I'll say whose individual rankings am I using to create the official list, and it does all the calculation on its own in the back end. At this point, all I should have to do is keep the lists updated, which is what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Now there's, multiple lists that I have to keep up with, but it's, not all that much more work per episode, so no sweat off my back there. That's really it. Ultimately, ended up not being too much, partially because this is a project that I started over 2 years ago. It was like the first big side project that I really saw all the way through, combining a lot of technologies I hadn't really used all that much or hadn't used together before. So this was a big step in my learning process, and because of that, going back into the code base was a bit jarring. It's not quite up to the standard that the standard of code that I produce now, I think, is of higher quality, if I do say so myself. So yeah, that's Kinda Funny in Review. If you want to check it out, kindafunnyinreview.com. I'll link it in the description of this video. If you like the MCU, if you like any of the franchises that the guys have gone over, definitely listen to the podcast. Obviously, I'm a big fan of it, or else I wouldn't have taken the time to make this site. And then if you're interested in Kind of Funny, I got links to all their YouTube channel, Patreon, Twitch, all their socials, links directly to the podcast if you want to listen to it that way. Definitely think it's worth it. Definitely think you should check it out. I think that's going to do it for this site for now.